Yeah, we're recording. This is office hours for September 17. Thanks to everyone who showed up. We are making good progress on this release checklist. I know this still looks pretty similar to where we were before, but man, all the PRs that we have remaining at this point feel awfully close. And I believe Harry has updated his PR in response to feedback. I've updated a couple of mine. I think we're super close on what the few that are left here. So then we really are starting to get into documentation and all this other stuff. And well, I am here. Let me just run over to the repo real quick. There is a milestone that we've been using with maybe limited success. I don't know, but this is also a way to track progress. So, as an example, I created a lot of issues yesterday around documentation. Yesterday in office hours, we went through and tried to identify areas that were really lacking in our docs. And so I've added, some of these are easier than others. I think, as an example, facts is going to be pretty straightforward. Feedback, maybe even more straightforward. Cookbooks could be split out, I'm not sure. But you'll notice that all of these are part of the V1 Alpha 1 milestone. It looks, the sad thing about using this milestone is it looks like we're only 62% complete, but that's of course because we only started using this relatively recently. But we have already knocked out a bunch of things that were on this list. But if you're looking for things to do, this is a good starting point. Or if you're just wanting to track progress, this is also an alternative. Yeah, and if something feels like it should be in this milestone, yeah, I think Harry, James, Bowie, myself can all add, remove stuff here whenever. So anyways, yeah, that is the milestone. It does not mean much of anything. It's mostly just for our purposes of tracking our progress here. Yeah. Okay, so that's our progress on V1 Alpha 1. We've got a couple updates on PRs that I want to get through in issue triage and some questions I had. But before I did that, Mark's on this call and he wanted to talk a little bit about our release and implementation plans.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, so I work with Rob and Bowie, and I'm basically working on the actual implementation for Gateway for our cloud load balancers in GKE. And so one of the things I wanted to kind of look at, like, things that make the Gateway API successful outside of just the spec itself. So things like how Google is communicating it, and how we're announcing it, and how we're creating collateral and tutorials for users to kind of get going with it or understand how it works. And so I wanted to reach out to the other contributor companies. So Harry and Daniel, I was just going to ping you on Slack and see, try to get an understanding of who is responsible, like at Red Hat and Kong, for the actual productization of Gateway, and how the companies are announcing it, and what collateral we're building for tutorials and stuff like that. One of the pieces here is similar to kind of how Ingress had a bunch of examples on the Kubernetes website. I think it does make a lot of sense to have a generic Gateway example to show what the spec looks like, but since there's no reference implementation, it's not actually possible to do it. And then we would have pointers or sections for all the implementations that exist in which you can use it for that implementation. And so that was kind of the idea of how we would handle it on the website and where users would go to actually try this out. But obviously I want to reach out to other companies involved and see what their actual implementation plans are, so we can figure out what the best way to do this is. So I I guess Harry and Dana, if it's okay, I can reach out to you guys and we can chat more on Slack about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Mark. And I would also recommend reaching out to either Nick Young or James Peach, who both have been highly involved in the project and are affiliated to VMware.
Yep. Yeah, good point. Was going to reach out to James as well.
Cool. And I believe he's on PTO the rest of this week, so you may not hear back from him right away.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great, thanks, Mark. It's exciting to actually think of this turning into something that's usable and hopefully a bunch of different products going forward. So it's exciting.
That light at the end of the tunnel, we're starting to see it.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, it's real.
It's great. Awesome. Well, the next thing I had on the agenda here was just so some of you may have noticed I threw out a PR last night after our office hours that was really just a whole bunch of API cleanup. And actually, let me start there. I don't want to review this PR quite yet, but just to give you an idea of the scope of this PR, it's just a bunch, like it's probably too many things, but everything just kind of felt looped together. And if I changed one, all of these in individual PRs, they'd always be conflicting with each other. So adding min and max length everywhere, removing that required tag because we were inconsistently using it in some places and I haven't seen it many others. So it's inferred, it doesn't have any real meaning. So I just removed it. Updating the default fields to no longer be optional. Thank you. I think it was Damien who showed how to do that properly. Thank you. It's much better. I realized as so the examples were broken, which seems to happen all the time. We really do need some kind of test for that. With that said, as I was updating the examples, I realized that we updated the forward to for HTTP route, but none of the other routes. So where we once had consistency, we didn't. So I fixed them to be consistent again. So relatively tiny, well, lots of changes. None of them on their own are massive, but combined, they're a lot of API cleanup. So with that said, this whole experience got me thinking about a couple things in our API. And what really got me thinking was looking at the examples of forward to. It felt less than ideal, right? And I know, like I approved this. It made sense at the time. We switched action to forward to forward and forward to forward. Sorry, forward to two, and this was the end result. But it feels like we have a lot of kind of extra weight here that, especially for the default case, feels less than ideal. I don't know. So I was wondering if there was any appetite for flattening this structure a bit. I think one of the easiest potential ways to flatten this is, first off, we have target ref and weight at different levels, weight and port at different levels. And I was curious, just figured I'd float the idea, can they all be the same level? Can we have name, resource, group, weight, or is that just too weird of a reference? The target ref here feels, to me at least, like maybe some extra weight, but I'm open to feedback here.
Is there any specific specification that refs have to be self-contained? It sounded like from the upstream that we should be able to customize refs.
Yes,
it's just like structurally, it's like a pointer, so people tend to lump it into its own struct.
Yes, exactly. But the guidance I've seen from upstream, and I looked for some more clarification pinged Jordan yesterday as well, just to try and understand it better. And the guidance, as I'm understanding it, is that we should use custom reference types, and those are indeed encouraged. So based on that, I wanted to go to what I had proposed in backend policy without realizing that it actually was different than what's in forward to. So in backend policy, we have a backend ref, and that backend ref is group resource name port. Whereas in all our forward to targets, we have a target ref, which has group resource name, and then at the same level as target ref, not inside, we have port and wait. And to me, that feels like maybe, yeah.
It feels okay. Like, as long as it's unambiguous.
Right, yeah. I mean, the argument is if we end up having, 1,000 different fields as part of a ref in the future, then maybe that's less than ideal. But for right now, we have so many levels here. For these, it makes our simple use case even like the forward to split feels weird, and then forward to target ref all the way down. Just do we need all that? Yeah.
Rob, can you help refresh my memory? Do you know offhand what other fields are there of a forward other than two?
Yeah, so that's my next thing. So we split forward to it. So, okay, there was an action here, and the action included forward to and extension ref. And what we ended up doing is renaming action to forward, renaming forward to two, and leaving the extension ref in there. So what that means is we have forward to and we have forward extension ref. So we wouldn't need that extra level if we could move the extension ref to, say, I don't know where, somewhere else. Or yeah, that was going to be my next. I don't know if this is exactly where you were going, but my next question was going to be, can we somehow merge those? Because target ref feels awfully similar to extension ref. Like it's just a resource, a pointer to an arbitrary resource somewhere. So could we just have forward to a reference, and that reference may or may not be an extension? It could be a service, or it could be an extension of the API.
Yeah, that is where my thinking was going as well. So, I mean, having target ref, the reason of having target ref is because we want to support multiple types in there. So that itself is an extension point. That should be good enough. And if somebody just wants a single one, they're most welcome to use just a single target ref.
Yeah, okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, there is general support for flattening this down to be forward to, and then a list of references, and those references could include wait and port as an example, or is that too far?
Just to be clear, you're saying line 46, 47 collapse, like forward to one word?
Yeah,
okay.
And then I'm saying we get rid of target ref and pull name out one level.
And we also get rid of extension ref inside.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that would go a long way in simplifying the interface.
Cool. If there's no pushback to this, I'll create a PR. And I mean, it's fine if once you see the PR, you don't like it, that's fine. We can deal with that. But as long as it seems reasonable at this point, I'll at least start in that direction, because I think there's some room to simplify this.
One concern that I have is like the thing we discussed initially, where target ref is a pointer, and it like what is the upstream guidance on there? There is some confusion there. So as long as we can sort that out to make sure that we
Yeah.
have a unified API where people are not getting surprised, that's all.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Rob, since we're on this topic, if we look at lines 38 and 39, this is just kind of always, especially since we pluralize host name, this has always been something in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, what's the use case for having plural hosts, plural host names? Is there a possibility to collapse that as well? I know hosts, or I know this kind of started off with a lot of the look and feel of Ingress, but am I missing something? Is there an opportunity there that we can just go ahead and say, okay, now that host names are pluralized, or we don't even need host names anymore, and hosts is plural, and or what am I missing there that maybe I just don't see on how we could collapse hosts or host names into hosts?
That is a fantastic question. I have to pull up the types. Does anyone remember offhand if we have anything else left in spec besides hostname? So we have HTTP route host, and it's literally just, okay. So the idea is that you can't have a list of spec. So it just, like, spec can't be a list. So you need some attribute here to, okay. Yeah, this is confusing.
So if it was just hosts, if you go back to that YAML, that kind of helps me visualize it. If we go back to, and it's just hosts, and we're able to specify, right, host is a list of essentially host names that include the rules and the actions and such.
Would it be terrible to, and again, this is a change from Ingress, but to just flatten this out one level as well and say that each route is basically a single HTTP route host, and that can include multiple host names and rules for those host names. And if you want to specify a different set of host names, you just use a different route.
Remember, that's where we started off, right? I mean, unless I'm misunderstood what you said, you're basically saying, okay, just make host names singular again. Is that correct, or did I misunderstand you?
I'm actually talking about a step back, like actually a more dramatic shift of the stuff I've highlighted, just remove it. Remove hosts and the list concept altogether, and have every route represent a set of host names and rules for those host names. And that's it.
That was what I was thinking, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the one who added the pluralizing host name PR. Maybe we can singularize that again. I don't want to open that can of worms again.
So I'm not even suggesting that. I'm suggesting something entirely different.
Yeah. I'm suggesting add that to that. Or add that to what you are suggesting.
I mean, I don't mind plural host names. I think that has a place of, this route supports foo.com and foo.ca as an example, right?
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. What gets confusing is hosts is really something that could just be referenced,
Yeah.
It doesn't add any value. You can just have a different resource at that point.
Yeah, and I agree.
Rob, I'm not quite following. What is the suggestion?
Okay, so my suggestion is to remove the highlighted part here and make every route a single list of host names and rules associated with those host names.
So it's
And
like a string map.
No. So right now we have, okay, let me pull this back up.
Okay,
Maybe
maybe
this will
yeah.
help.
The code
Okay.
might be easier to understand.
So right now we have host, which is HTTP route host, and this has everything that we care about. I'm just saying we turn this
Oh yeah,
into
yeah, yeah.
HTTP
Okay.
route spec. That's it. This becomes spec, and we get rid of this all entirely. Like this extra level of listing feels unnecessary to me.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think the reason this existed in the first place is because there was a default route,
Yeah,
Yeah.
default
I
host.
think you're right.
That's right.
And host name was singularized. So at that point, it made more sense to have
Yes.
multiple hosts, right? So can you go back
Yeah.
to the YAML again? So,
Yeah.
with that said, highlight the host again, how you did that before, right? We remove that and, the yellow section where you're saying collapse that down. And now look how much easier that
Yes.
is on the
Yes.
eyes. And to me, it's so much easier for a user who doesn't really know a lot about what's going on to be able to pick it up and start using it and saying, oh, okay, this makes sense. Whereas you look at this and it's like, whoa, I mean, it's a lot to try and digest.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my, I don't know, my reaction last night as I was looking at the examples a bit closer. I was like, how did we create this? What did we do? Like everything
Oh my
made
God,
sense.
this monster has grown out of control.
Each change in isolation made sense, but then we got here and it just, oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I'll take a couple notes and I'll do a follow-up here. Okay.
And it is funny because it's like that's one of the things I like about the generating the YAML examples is you get to see, okay, what does the user interface look like here? So
Yes.
Yeah, I did a similar exercise on Gateway, and we have a similar problem where there is like route namespaces and then route selector and namespace selector, and I just haven't gotten around to open a ticket for that. So
Yeah.
I'll do that. Like that is also another sort of a monster that we have created.
Yes. All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for the feedback here. I think this will be a good improvement. Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, the next one, and I maybe I'll just do a fun Slack poll or something for this one. But I'm curious. One of the bits of feedback I got from Tim is that defaults were confusing to him in object references. Like, well, we'll go right back to this YAML. To him, it wasn't clear what name referred to. In this example, okay, sure, we've got service in the name, so okay, that kind of makes sense. But it's not intuitive to a user exactly what this is. So I already made the change because I think it's very obvious for extension ref that no one knows extension ref is config map, and config map probably isn't going to be the most commonly used extension point, I don't think. But this is at least somewhat, reasonable in the sense that almost everyone is going to target a service here. So if we can make that easier and allow for shorthand, I get the rationale behind it. But I also get the argument that seeing this YAML can be confusing when you're used to seeing, kind or resource and group, and then you know immediately what it's referring to. I don't know. Does anyone
Are you suggesting like service name in parallel and then just have a validation that they can't be both set at the same time or something?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Tim said. He said if you really want to have, make it easy to reference a service as an example, then maybe you should use service name. I don't know.
That seems reasonable since 95% of it will be service.
And plus, given the fact that target ref is not going to be the extension point, how we had two and a extension point, and we are getting rid of this after this conversation. Now we can still have target ref, which is the extension point. Very few people use it, and then we have like service name. But then the port
Yeah.
should be port and not service port. Otherwise, or should it be
Yeah.
service port?
I think port. I think port is only. I mean, we're just doing, unlike Ingress where we have port name and number. We are just targeting. I think we have port name and number, but here I think
Please
we're
no
just
port
targeting
name.
port. Yes, yes, yes. I completely agree. Port name is so painful. Okay. Yeah, or anyone who's interested in this, I think it does make sense. But I guess I've already volunteered to flatten this. Yeah, I'll leave it for a different PR to simplify the defaulting here, or have service name field as an example. Okay. That's it. I encourage everyone, now that examples are about to be up to date again, to take a look at them and see if there are any other glaring monsters in there that feel just not quite right. Anyways, there have been some updates here. It looks like Harry's PR is actually the most recently updated. So let's run through this one if you've got time. What has changed?
I updated the PR yesterday, and I think there is some activity that I haven't even gotten to yet.
Okay. Oh, that's it. Got it. I got it. Okay. So the idea of changing this naming a little bit to
Yeah, you should go through and write out the YAML, because I noticed that it would be a route. Right now it's like a route, allow, route, override, allow all, which feels strange.
No, so there is one more level, right? There is another level. So this is allow route override, and then you have another YAML object which has a key of certificate, and then you have allow or deny.
Oh, I see.
that
Allow, route, override, allow.
I think I agree with you, though. The idea that because you can deny inside the struct name, that the field name, including allow, is confusing.
Yes, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good feedback.
Okay. So yeah. So we can do route override or something along those lines, and then does the indentation make sense here?
Yeah, I think, do we want route policy, or, because it just feels like route policy : allow override all or something, or route override allow all.
So that's the other part, boy, that I'm trying to correct is it's going to be route policy. Under that you have a certificate key, and then you allow or disallow, right? Because we want to manage more fine-grained allow disallow policies. So that's why it's the route policy itself is a struct.
Okay, maybe let me take a look at it. Maybe I'm looking at, I didn't expand the whole thing, so might have gotten confused.
Cool.
Okay, and I'll add in some YAML examples here, because this is again one of those changes where looking at it holistically probably is going to help everyone review better.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Okay. I wanted to take a few minutes here. I know we're running out of time. I'll mention briefly that I have updated this PR, the gateway selection on routes, and backend policy for service level config. I still need to respond to comments, but I have actually updated it. So both should be good to go now. But with that said, I want to spend most of the rest of the time on this PR, if it's okay. And I specifically wanted to run through every min-max I've added here and get some kind of consensus on if these minimum and maximum values are meaningful. They may not be. So if especially if maximums are too low, that would be great feedback to have, or if they're too high. I think the port numbers are pretty standard.
Should we have a min of 0? Like we shouldn't have negative weights.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing, if minimum should be 0 or not.
Yes, we should.
Minimum of 1 if the default is 1.
What should, I thought I added a max here. I have not yet, it looks like. What should the max be for weight? In another place, I added a max of 100 for an example, but I know that probably has two problems. One, it furthers the idea that this is a percentage-based thing, which it's not. And it does limit the potential granularity here. A suggestion was 1,000. Does that feel too high as a maximum value here for weight?
I was going to suggest 10,000.
All right, sure. And then I've added this for the forward to. Actually, I don't think I want a min of 1 here. So this is the number of forward to objects in this list. I think min should be 0, right? Can you, oh no, this is a forwarding to target. So this, right, okay. So we want at most, we want at least 1 if you've gotten this far, if you have actually defined a forward. Is 16 too many? Like, I mean, do you want to split traffic between more than 16 ever?
Like, should we even go lower, like
Okay.
4? Like what? Like this is a suggestion, right? Like, should we start with 4 and see if people have use cases and then bump it up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm unfamiliar with, splitting between huge numbers of backends here. 4 feels like it may be a little low, but I don't have any use cases beyond 4 right now. Anyone else think of a use case where we'd want more than 4? All right, well, we'll start here. Well, no, yeah, well, we'll start here. And if anyone has issues, add some comments. Again, port range seems straightforward. Yeah, it looks like we should go to 10,000 here. I think that's fine. Again, this is for the number of listeners on a gateway. And does anyone have some kind of real limitation here on the number of listeners they can support?
I mean, 16 seems way too less for larger use cases. So listeners are virtual hosts, right? So the way I'm thinking is like if somebody has a cluster which is maintaining multiple hosts, and if they are not comfortable with having TLS configurations at the route level, then they would do that at the gateway level. So if we have a limitation of 16, that means you cannot have more than 16 hosts
Yeah,
with their TLS configurations. So
that's fair.
so maybe 256, or is that too high? I don't know. Maybe 64.
What would be bad about going to 256? Or
I don't know that there's
why is the
anything.
bad one worse than good?
I mean, our general idea has been to start with a reasonably low value with the idea that we can extend it as a use case bumps into it. If we say that you can have up to 256, then there's some kind of built-in assumption that implementation should test up to 256 listeners just to ensure that it works. So we're just, we're just increasing that upper limit that implementations have to support here.
Yeah, this one's a little tricky
I see.
because
Well, we've had 64 and 128 suggested, all meet in the middle to start with, and I will welcome additional feedback on this one. I'm not familiar enough with the different use cases, but I do completely agree that, for that virtual host kind of use case, 16 is too low. Okay, similar thing with addresses. How many? I guess this is probably going to be at least as high as number of listeners. Is that fair? Well, no. I guess it depends on the model.
yeah, it depends. This one 16 seems sufficient in this case, but I'm not sure.
It doesn't have to match though. I mean, this is the address of the item
Yeah,
that we
this
just
is.
talked about right above, right?
Yeah, and to be even more specific, this is the requested address, and in that case, yeah, I mean.
I mean, you usually
could go ahead.
that's a network endpoint, right? So that's a network
Yeah.
address, and that's virtual host. That's like different layers of the
Yeah.
network. So
Yeah.
don't match. We have something in the chat.
Yeah. I will leave that then. Another port one, which seems reasonable.
One
Go
question,
ahead.
Rob. Did you consider having a max limit on the host name like fields, or SNI like fields, like where the host name can be only so long? I don't know if
Yes.
Kubernetes upstream does a name max validation. I think it does.
Yeah. I think we just haven't run into those yet. But as an example, 253 seems to be the standard limit, and I've used 253 everywhere, because almost everywhere, not just for host names, because Kubernetes core validation uses is DNS subdomain validation for so many fields, like just a ton of fields, and that includes this max length of 253. So like resource names are 253 characters long at most. So that's where I got this from, along with obviously host names. So I did add this max length in a lot of places, but I may have missed some. Is that what you were? I know this is not actually a host name, but no, this is in host name match. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a host name. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I think we should enforce that almost everywhere you have a string input, sort of.
Yeah. 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 And then the other ones that are less clear, like I don't even know if I really need a max length here, because we have an enum, so it really should only be one of these. I don't know why I didn't know to remove this. I think it's a little overkill. Okay, well, I know we're just about out of time here, but I wanted to at least introduce this and give everyone a chance to at least, suggest higher limits for things that don't make sense. One of the examples here is, okay, this needs to be increased. The listeners needs to be increased, and I can make that note, but I've also limited the number of conditions, and I think that may be a controversial one. It seems like right now we have a max of, say, 5 conditions that are going to be set on any resource at a given time. But I know there's nothing preventing implementations from adding their own custom conditions. Does 16 feel like a high enough max? I mean, does anyone have any plans to just, support tons of custom conditions here?
The more the conditions, and maybe this is an opinion, the harder it is for the end user to figure out
Yeah.
what the heck is the state. So
Yeah.
I would say 5 or maybe 8 is sufficient to start with, and then we can revisit why does somebody need that, right, and bump it up.
That's fair.
Yeah, I agree with Harry. I think 8 should be more than enough.
Cool. I will update this as well. And I know we have hit time, but yeah, if you have any other thoughts, there's a lot more limits I've added here. As you can see, we're just a fraction of the way through this PR, but I just wanted to get some of the high level things like listeners and forward to targets out of the way at least. Yeah, thanks for the great feedback. There are a couple more PRs that I think are close to ready now, and if you have time, definitely take another look at them. I'll try and update comments as well later today. And I will make a follow-up PR to flatten this all out. I'm excited about simplifying these routes. And if you're looking for ways to contribute, a reminder that there are a whole bunch of new issues here. We're starting to move into a time where we really need documentation to be better. So yes, if you have some time, this would be a great way to contribute, or reviewing existing PRs. All right, well, I think that's all I've got.
To stay on the V1 Alpha 1 milestone as far as those issues.
Yeah, I think that's great. But if you see other issues that you feel like we really should address by V1 Alpha 1, there's a decent chance we just missed it. We just missed adding it. So definitely go ahead and, ping any one of the maintainers or ping on the issue and say, hey, should this be part of V1 Alpha 1? Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, Rob.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.